For decades, Gloria Copeland was the steady voice of faith and strength. But when the cameras started rolling this time, no one expected what came next. With tears in her eyes and a trembling voice, she shared news that left even her most loyal fans speechless. The studio went silent. The internet exploded. What could shake a woman known for unshakable faith? This heartbreaking moment changed everything, and you won't believe what she revealed. For decades, Gloria Copeland stood as a symbol of strength, faith, and perfect trust in God's promises. She spoke with confidence about divine health, about a life protected by belief, about sickness having no place where faith was strong. Millions listened. Many believed not just her words, but her life itself was proof that faith always wins. That's why her recent confession hit so hard. When Gloria spoke about her health struggles, it wasn't dramatic or loud. There were no big announcements or shocking details. Instead, it was quiet, honest, almost fragile. She admitted that she had been walking through a difficult season physically and emotionally. She didn't explain everything. She didn't need to. The message was clear. Even she was struggling. In that moment, faith collided with reality. For those watching, it felt unreal. This was the same woman who had told them year after year that believers could live free from illness. The same woman many had looked to during their own battles. Hearing her say she was hurting created a sudden silence, not just on screen, but in people's hearts. Some felt confusion first. How could this be happening? Others felt fear, because if someone like Gloria could suffer, what did that say about everyone else? And for many, it was deeply personal. Her words touched places where people had been hiding their own pain, their doubts, their unspoken prayers that hadn't been answered the way they hoped. Gloria didn't present herself as defeated, but she also didn't hide. She spoke as a woman facing something she never expected to face publicly, and that honesty changed the moment. She was no longer just a teacher of faith. She was a person living inside it, with uncertainty, with pain, and with questions. That confession shattered an image that had been solid for decades. Not with anger, not with scandal, but with truth. And once that truth was spoken, nothing felt the same. Faith no longer looked like a shield against real life. It looked like something tested by it. For millions watching, it was shocking, not because she was weak, but because she was real. When Gloria Copeland opened up about her health struggles, she probably didn't realize just how big of a wave it would create. For decades, she had been the face of faith, healing, and divine health. She wasn't just preaching it, she lived it. Or at least that's what people believed. So, when she admitted calmly and with a heavy heart that she was battling something personal and physical, the reaction was instant. But it wasn't simple. It was split right down the middle. Some people cried with her. They didn't see her confession as a failure or a contradiction. They saw it as a moment of courage. Even Gloria, they whispered shocked, but not in anger. For these supporters, it was like watching a friend finally tell the truth about a burden they'd carried alone. It made her feel human, and in a strange way, more inspiring. These were the people who had always believed that faith wasn't about pretending everything was perfect. It was about trusting God even when things fell apart. They filled social media with prayers, love, and words of encouragement. "We've learned so much from you," one wrote, "and now we're standing with you." But not everyone felt that way. There was another side, a louder, more skeptical group. Some of them had been followers once, or maybe never believed in the prosperity message to begin with. To them, this moment wasn't about compassion. It was about contradiction. For years, Gloria had taught that through faith, sickness had no power. She said believers could claim healing, speak it into existence, and walk in health if they truly trusted God. So how could she now be sick? How could she suffer from something she had always promised could be avoided? To those critics, it felt like betrayal, not just of her message, but of their trust. Some people had given money, prayed harder, and believed deeper, all based on the idea that faith would protect them. Some had lost loved ones while holding on to that promise. Some had spent nights wondering why healing never came. And now here was Gloria, the woman who had led them to believe in a life above pain, revealing that she too was not untouched. That hurt. It wasn't just anger, it was heartbreak. People felt like they had been sold something that didn't hold up. And seeing their leader admit the same truth many of them had wrestled with, That life doesn't always obey perfect faith left them bitter. If she knew this could happen to her, one person commented online, why didn't she tell us sooner? Another wrote, all these years, and now she says she's struggling? Where does that leave us? Even within her closest circles, the tension was real. Some leaders in the prosperity movement stood by her, offering quiet support and reminding people that faith doesn't mean immunity. Others distanced themselves, worried that this moment could damage not just Gloria's legacy, but the entire structure of the teaching they built their ministries on. If Gloria Copeland, of all people, could get sick, what did that mean for everyone else? For her team, it was a PR nightmare. They scrambled to decide how to respond. Do they double down on the message? Do they shift it? Do they explain the illness as an attack or a test of faith rather than a breakdown of doctrine? Behind the scenes, there were meetings, long phone calls, debates. Every word she had ever said about healing was now being re-examined, not just by the public, but by the people who worked closest to her. Gloria herself stayed mostly quiet after the initial confession. Maybe she knew that no matter what she said next, some people had already made up their minds. Some had already chosen to support her through the storm. Others had already walked away, disappointed and disillusioned. She continued her ministry work in smaller ways, but there was a noticeable pause, a quiet retreat. For someone who had spent years on stages, behind cameras, and in the spotlight, that silence spoke volumes. There was also a deeper kind of betrayal happening, one that wasn't about headlines or social media posts. It was personal. For those who had built their entire spiritual lives around Gloria's teachings, this moment felt like the ground shifting beneath their feet. Not everyone can admit that their faith has been shaken, but it showed in the questions that began to fill forums, comments, and inboxes. Was I wrong to believe? What does this mean about my own sickness? Why didn't anyone tell us this could happen? The most painful part wasn't that Gloria was sick. It was that, in facing her humanity, she accidentally exposed theirs too. And still, others clung tighter. For them, Gloria's vulnerability didn't weaken the message. It deepened it. They believed that God was still in control, that healing might still come, and that this was a test of faith, not a failure. They held on to every word she had ever spoken, now with a layer of heartbreak, but also with compassion. Maybe, one supporter wrote, she's teaching us something even more important now, how to walk through pain with faith, not just how to avoid it. Gloria Copeland's confession didn't just reveal her illness. It revealed something about everyone watching. It showed who wanted perfect answers and who could live with questions. It showed who had placed faith in a formula and who believed in a God bigger than formulas. And it proved that no matter how strong a leader may appear, they're still human, still fragile, still capable of hurting and needing help. The ministry hasn't collapsed. Her words didn't end the movement, but something shifted. A moment of raw honesty cracked the surface of a polished image. Some walked away, others came closer, and all of them, whether in support or disappointment, had to face the same uncomfortable truth. Faith is not a guarantee. It's a journey. One that even Gloria Copeland is still learning how to walk. That's what made it so powerful and so painful. The moment Gloria Copeland admitted she was facing health issues, everything shifted. It wasn't just a personal confession. It was a lightning strike right through the center of a belief system she had spent her entire life teaching. For years, Gloria had stood on stage, looked into the eyes of her audience, and confidently proclaimed that faith could conquer all. That if you believed enough, declared God's promises loud enough, and gave faithfully, you could be healed. You could be rich. You could be free from suffering. That message had built her ministry. That message had built an empire. But now, suddenly, reality was clashing with doctrine, and it was impossible to ignore. The pressure came quickly. It started with a few whispers on social media, a handful of blogs asking, if divine health is real, how is Gloria sick? But those whispers grew into a roar. Mainstream Christian media picked up the story. Secular news outlets followed. And before long, the world wasn't just watching Gloria. They were watching everything she represented. The prosperity gospel, word of faith, the whole movement. The prosperity message had always walked a fine line. It promised something that everyone wanted: hope, success, healing. But it often left out the part about what happens when life doesn't cooperate, when the bills don't get paid, when the diagnosis comes anyway, when the prayers don't bring healing. Gloria's admission pulled that uncomfortable truth out into the open. People began digging through past sermons, looking for contradictions. Video clips surfaced of her saying, "God's will is for you to be healed, always." Now those same words felt different, not hopeful, not empowering, but unrealistic, even cruel to some, because if Gloria couldn't live up to that promise, who could? Inside her ministry, the tension was unbearable. Staff meetings got longer. Emails got more careful. The Copeland team had to figure out how to respond, not just to the criticism, but to the fear. Their message was being questioned, their foundation was shaking, and the path forward wasn't clear. Some leaders pushed to stay the course. "We double down," they said. "We remind people that Gloria is under attack, that the enemy is testing her faith, that this isn't a failure, it's spiritual warfare." To them, this was a chance to rally the faithful, to draw a line in the sand. Either you believe the doctrine or you don't. No in between. But others weren't so sure. Quiet conversations started happening in corners of the ministry, whispers of doubt. Maybe we need to adjust the message. Maybe we've been too absolute. Some staff members had watched their own loved ones get sick. They knew the pain of praying and not seeing answers. And now they saw that pain reflected in Gloria's eyes too. One longtime employee said, "It's not just about doctrine anymore, it's about people. Real people with real lives." She wasn't trying to destroy the message. She just wanted to make room for honesty. But honesty is hard when the stakes are high. Millions of dollars were tied to the ministry's success. Millions of believers had built their spiritual lives on the promise that faith worked like a formula. Speak it, believe it, receive it. If the ministry started to walk back that teaching now, would the donations stop? Would the trust disappear? Would people feel betrayed? And more importantly, what would that say about God? That's where the real pressure came from. Not just from critics or the media, but from inside the hearts of people who were suddenly forced to re-examine what they believed. Because if Gloria Copeland, the queen of divine health, could get sick, then what did that mean for everyone else who had believed her? Some felt relief. Finally, someone was admitting that things aren't always perfect, that faith isn't a magic wand, that you can love God and still suffer. They clung to that honesty, hoping it would open the door to a more compassionate kind of Christianity, one that didn't shame people for being sick or broke or broken. Others felt betrayed. They had rearranged their entire lives around this teaching. They had tithed when they couldn't afford it. They had refused treatment, believing that accepting a diagnosis was speaking death. They had told their families that healing was guaranteed because Gloria said so. Now, with her confession, it felt like the ground was falling out from beneath them. And still, there were those who refused to waver. They believed harder, prayed louder, posted messages of faith on Gloria's page every day. To them, her struggle was proof that the enemy was scared, that she was so powerful in the spirit that Satan himself had launched an attack. Her sickness, they said, was just a setup for a miracle, a comeback story, a chance to glorify God even louder. But even that came with tension, because what if the miracle didn't come? What if Gloria's condition worsened? What would happen to the movement then? For Kenneth Copeland Ministries, the crossroads was undeniable. Either they evolve or they risk losing relevance. Do they keep preaching the same message, unbending and absolute, or do they start to make space for the messy, uncomfortable parts of real life? The ones that can't be fixed with a prayer and a seed offering? Gloria's confession forced that question into the spotlight, and the answer is still unclear. Behind the scenes, changes were happening. Subtle at first. Sermons started including phrases like, "God works in ways we don't always understand." There was more talk of process instead of instant results. Healing was still promised, but with more nuance, more softness. It wasn't a full shift, but it was something. And that something felt like the beginning of a long, painful journey. A modern-day crucifixion, not of a person, but of a doctrine. Not a death in the physical sense, but a breaking down, a laying bare. A chance to ask, what if we were wrong about some things? What if faith isn't about outcomes, but about endurance? For the millions watching, this became more than a ministry scandal. It became a personal test, a test of whether they believed in a God who only works when things go right, or a God who is still good, Even when nothing makes sense, some walked away, others stayed. Many are still deciding. Gloria Copeland didn't just announce a health problem, she accidentally started a reformation. Whether she intended to or not, she forced a doctrine to look in the mirror, to ask itself the hardest questions, to wonder if in chasing perfection, it had lost sight of compassion, if in promising power, it had forgotten grace. The future of the prosperity gospel now hangs in the balance. And no one, not even Gloria, knows exactly what comes next. But one thing is certain, the journey forward won't be smooth, it won't be simple. It will be a road paved with questions, loss, adjustment, and maybe, if we're honest enough, a little bit of healing too. Not the kind that fixes everything, but the kind that says, we're still here, we still believe, even if we don't have all the answers. When Gloria Copeland sat down and shared her personal health struggles, everything changed. Not just for her, but for the millions of people who had followed her for years. This wasn't just a moment of vulnerability, it was a shift, a turning point. For decades, Gloria had stood tall as one of the strongest voices in Christian television, preaching messages of faith, healing, and prosperity. Her teachings promised that through unwavering belief, anyone could experience victory in every part of life. Sickness, gone through faith. Financial stress, defeated through declarations and giving. Fear, replaced by bold confidence in God's promises. And for so many, Gloria's life seemed like proof that her message worked. She looked healthy. She was successful. She had influence, family, and a global platform. People didn't just listen to her, they trusted her. They shaped their faith around her words. That's why, when Gloria confessed she was battling serious health issues, it felt like a shockwave. The image that had seemed so unshakable suddenly cracked. And in that crack, millions saw something they never expected: honesty. It's strange how something so simple, just telling the truth, can feel so rare in certain circles. But in the world of televangelism, where the pressure to appear perfect is constant, Gloria's moment of honesty was monumental. She admitted she was struggling. She asked for prayer. She didn't hide behind her usual strength. And just like that, everything changed. Her legacy, once built on the promise of unshakable health and prosperity, began to shift into something deeper, more human, more relatable. Suddenly, Gloria wasn't just a preacher on a stage. She was a woman of faith walking through pain. And in doing that, she taught a new kind of lesson, one she may have never planned to teach. It wasn't about naming and claiming healing. It wasn't about being above suffering. It was about facing reality with faith still in your heart. And, for many, that hit harder than any sermon ever could. People started to talk, not in the loud, scandal-hungry way they do when leaders fall from grace, but in quiet, thoughtful tones. Friends, families, and small groups sat around kitchen tables and asked, what if faith is more about walking through the valley than avoiding it altogether? That question, sparked by Gloria's confession, opened a door to something the church desperately needed: permission to be real. Gloria's honesty gave people space to say, I'm not okay either. It gave space for pastors, leaders, and everyday believers to admit they were tired, sick, grieving, confused. It made it okay to say, I prayed and I'm still waiting. Or, I believed and it didn't turn out like I thought. And that was powerful. For years, people had felt pressure to keep up appearances, to say the right words, to declare healing, even while silently dealing with pain. But Gloria's revelation cracked that pressure wide open. Suddenly, real conversations were happening, not just about theology, but about humanity, about faith that stays alive even when things don't go according to plan. The truth is, Gloria didn't destroy her legacy by being honest. She transformed it. She moved from being just a symbol of strength to being a symbol of courage, because it takes courage to admit that life is hard. It takes courage to say, I don't have all the answers. And it takes even more courage to do it when millions of eyes are watching. The lessons that came out of her confession weren't flashy or dramatic. They were simple, but deeply needed. One of those lessons was this: faith isn't about pretending everything is okay. It's about holding on to God even when it's not. For too long, many people thought faith meant smiling through the pain, never acknowledging weakness, always acting like they were one prayer away from a miracle. But real faith, it's the kind that can say, I'm hurting, but I still believe. That's what Gloria showed. And for millions, That was a breath of fresh air. Another lesson: even leaders are human. Sometimes we forget that the people we look up to are still just people. They have bodies that age, hearts that break, moments of doubt and discouragement. Gloria's confession reminded everyone that no one is above life's struggles, not even those with microphones and cameras. And maybe the most powerful lesson of all: honesty is not weakness, it's strength. In a world where religious figures often feel pressure to protect their image, Gloria chose something different. She chose truth, and that truth made her more relatable, more human, and oddly enough, more powerful than ever before. Because people don't connect with perfection, they connect with realness. The aftermath of Gloria's confession wasn't all easy, though. There were people who felt betrayed, people who had built their faith on the idea that what Gloria taught was a guarantee. For them, her sickness felt like the rug had been pulled out from under them. Some walked away, others stayed, but with questions they didn't know how to answer. That was hard, but it was also necessary, because if a message can't survive honest questions, maybe it's time to rethink the message. Over time, something else started to shift, not just in Gloria's ministry, but in the greater Christian world. Pastors began speaking with more nuance. Ministries started focusing more on compassion than perfection. The prosperity gospel wasn't erased, but it started to lose its grip a little. And in its place, a more balanced message began to grow. A message that says God is good, even when life is not. A message that says healing is real, but so is suffering. A message that says faith can look like strength, but it can also look like tears. That shift might not have happened without Gloria's vulnerability. And in the middle of all of it, Gloria kept showing up, maybe not as frequently, maybe with less energy. But when she did appear, there was something different in her eyes. A kind of peace, a kind of clarity. She had nothing left to prove. She had already given everything she had. And now, just by being real, she was doing more than ever before. Her followers changed too. Many stayed, some left, but the ones who remained were stronger, not because they believed harder, but because they had been through something. Together. Their faith wasn't shiny anymore, but it was solid. In the end, Gloria Copeland's legacy didn't end with her confession. It was rewritten by it. She didn't fall. She opened a new chapter, one where faith meets reality, where truth matters more than image, and where healing isn't always physical. Sometimes it's the healing of the heart, the soul, and the community around you. That's the new reality, one shaped by honesty, and one that might just lead to a deeper, more real kind of faith for millions. Because Gloria didn't just teach people how to speak healing, she showed them how to walk through pain and still believe.